All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you, panelists, for being here. We just heard a wonderful example of the types of innovation that are happening around mobility and transportation and keeping people connected and giving them the ability to regain a certain amount of control and choice, which we all want. And I think that's one of the big takeaways when you're looking at aging, is that people want the same things they've always wanted, which is to do the stuff they want to do and do the stuff they need to do. So one metric that was put up on the screen was that there were 12 million people in need of transportation. But mobility includes transportation. It goes beyond transportation. So I'd like to just I'm not going to do many of these to get every single opinion, but I'm really curious about how each of you frames the problem you believe most needs to be solved. And please introduce yourselves.
Again, my name is Judi Bonilla, and I'm the Director of Innovation at Advocates for Aging. And what I see the biggest barrier is getting the information out to the right channels. Again, doing some straw polls. Often people say, you know, what if your grandparent needed a ride or your mom did, what would you do? I'd call you. I'm not here, who do you call? The senior center. It's trying to connect people to those resources because so many older adults have never accessed resources. They've always been independent. They do not know who to call, so they call no one.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dan. I lead our elder mobility group at Lyft. Me personally, I've been in the senior care business for over 10 years. My family operates one of the largest home care, non-medical home care businesses in the Bay Area. So I've been very close to our senior population, spent many years in senior living communities. At the core of what we do at Lyft, it's increased independence and reduced isolation of our elder population. That's what drives my team every single day. When you walk into a Brookdale community, the elders, the residents that live there, they're bound more or less by the walls of that community. They can't get out. Data that we see shows that those 65 and older, without access to transportation, 15% of those folks take fewer trips to doctor's appointments. 60% take fewer trips to get food and groceries, and 65% take fewer trips to see friends and family. So really it's about getting them back out into the community. A Brookdale community has one shuttle taking 150 IL residents around town all day. It's severely inefficient, it's a poor experience. How do we get them back into the community and do the things that they love to do growing up and being when they were with their son or daughter, with their family?
My name is Ken Pickar. I teach at Caltech. I'm very sensitive to what David Lindemann said. In fact, I wish I had the opportunity to say it first so I wouldn't look like I was repeating him. I'm very interested in the subject of how do we get very talented people to design product and useful things for the elderly and for the disabled. And the elderly and the disabled customer base is brought to us through very strong collaborations with retirement homes in the neighborhood, and as well with Rancho Los Amigos, the rehabilitation center of LA County and Downey. We also have a strong collaboration with Art Center College of Design, and so between us we work together in teams to do products that we feel are helpful. The mobility aspect of this is that we're often very interested in wheelchairs or walkers and how they can be made better. Particularly we're concerned with falls which occur during transfers or even in the walker just simply by keeling over. So we're trying to improve the products that are out there using the strong resource that we have, very much dictated by the people who are our customers, which are people from Rancho who have disabilities and people from the retirement homes who have been very, very helpful and strong and very opinionated as to how our product should develop.
So I'm really curious about what the most exciting thing you're doing with wheelchairs. A couple of years ago, we brought in, we being AARP at our live pitch event, we brought in a Japanese company called Wheel, which had a design factor that made these wheelchairs look so cool. I mean, you just wanted one, you know, and you know, it's like it's just a cool ride. And then about 3-4 years ago, my twins were juniors in high school. We're doing the college thing. We go to Lehigh and to the engineering program there, and they had an autonomous wheelchair. And this is 3-4 years ago. But the GPS that they were using was at such a level of, I don't know what the proper technical term is, but it could see so much that it could prevent the wheelchair from running into a fire plug or a pole, you know, from a canopy on the street, or any of those types of impediments to just, you know, getting from one point to another on the sidewalk. So to help us understand where is this all gone, and where's it going?
Well, we always come up with cool ideas. The question is, how useful are they, and how do we get these into manufacture? So some of the cool things that we've worked on in the last, we've been doing this now for, we're in our 3rd year, is a way of parking an electric wheelchair over an electrode so that the caregiver does not have to plug you in order to recharge you. You basically recharge yourself, and that proved to be, you know, really very popular and is being used at Rancho right now in test mode. Other cool things and interesting things that we're working on are, one of the big concerns in traveling in a wheelchair, of course, is pressure sores, which is, it really is a calamity if you get one. It requires an operation. We all know this problem. Well, what we have in prototype form is a way of detecting whether or not you've moved or not, and then tell you to move. And so, because you're just not conscious of not having made the right movements to relieve some of the pressure. And there's no one who's been in a wheelchair for a long time who either hasn't had it or isn't very concerned about it. So I think that's another one. A third one is transfer from wheelchairs to beds or to toilets. This is part of the falling, and we've just started on this today, ways of helping people who are paraplegic to be able to move out of their chair in a safe fashion by themselves. And it involves several appliances that go on to the wheelchair. The other thing which just always amazes me as I become more and more familiar with some of the issues is the simple things that we take for granted, such as opening a door. If you're in a wheelchair, it becomes a significant challenge. Just try to push a door open while it's closing on you and then get out while the door... Well, we've had a couple of classes who have worked on that problem with very simple devices which are also in tests at Rancho, which we feel might make a difference in the home or in the workplace.
So Judi, what's exciting you? You clearly see the challenge, the pain points, the problem, the use case. What's exciting you?
Well, what I see right now is starting to be the opening for collaboration, which wasn't there before. This has really been the domain of social service, is providing, whether you're a nonprofit or a AAA, you provided the senior transportation services. Now with something like Lyft, that opened another dimension, not to mention at the same time we are getting, the volume is just hitting it. So it's not only the innovation, the collaboration, but now there's, I'll say, a sense of urgency because so many people are now providing caregiving services for their grandparents. As many people know, most women provide the caregiving in the family, so they may be looking after, again, their husband's family or extended family. But now what I'm starting to see is a collaboration. The one thing that does concern me is that it's still verboten. No one wants to talk about giving up the keys. I've tried driving retirement, safe and 60 and behind the wheel. It is still not normalized. The one thing that I am heartened, and I think some of you know the commercial, it's at Prudential with Professor, I think it's Phil Davis. He's starting to talk about retirement, and he's made it very sexy with Post-it notes. And my thought is if he can make retirement sexy with Post-it notes and make it intergenerational, then we have the opportunity, and I think the model, to change our messaging. Because right now you go from being a driver to a non-driver with no transition. But again, with collaboration and that matter of choice and that sense, I'll say the sensibility, that you're supporting someone, empowering them, as opposed to that whole disempowerment model, which serves no one. So that's where I see the excitement.
So let the record show, sexy is in the eye of the beholder. But now I can go 3M. Yeah, with you, Judi, that's good to know. So Dan, why don't you kind of take that as your lead and jump right in.
Right now, our core platform at Lyft is ambulatory curb-to-curb transportation. There's no additional cost for a family member, a caretaker, caregiver to go with the resident wherever they want to go. So that person can always provide that additional support. Jody, you asked earlier where I see the future and where things are going. Right now, in certain markets in the US, we do have wheelchair accessible vehicles. So in certain markets in the US, we can provide door-through-door transportation. Our goal at Lyft is to service all levels of acuity over the next couple of years, and that's where we're going. We have partners who specialize in these types of transport. So we have wheelchair accessible vehicle operators we work with. Just last week, we announced a partnership with a company called Logisticare. Logisticare does non-emergency medical transport for Medicaid. Last year, they did 70 million rides for Medicaid beneficiaries. They have a fleet of partners who can do wheelchair accessible vehicles, ambulettes, wheelchair lifts. So we can bring in these partners in cases like this at Brookdale if their residents require higher level of support. So like in an AL community memory care, they need door-through-door transportation. But in the grand scheme of things, my team has only been around for about 8 months. We have well over 100 partnerships in elder care specifically. And I can't stress we're just at the beginning. When we talk also about autonomous vehicles, Lyft, some of you may know, General Motors, the car company, invested $500 million into Lyft in 2016. They are the hardware of autonomous vehicles. We are the software. So when you start layering that into the opportunity, we have an amazing road ahead of us, but we're really just at the beginning.
So as long as we're doing the Lyft commercial, so in addition to an established player like a GM, certainly knows automotive, you're also partnering with other startups. So you also announced a partnership with CareLinks.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that a little?
Yes, we're working with many startups. Even GoGo Grandparent, who was up on stage earlier, we have a partnership with them. They're leveraging our API to make their technology work. But going back to CareLinks, CareLinks, for those of you who don't know them in the room, they're basically Lyft for caregivers. So basically they have a network of 170,000 licensed caregivers on their platform, and you can go and search and find one for your mom or your father or your grandparent. How it works now is they have a mobile app. They fully integrated the Lyft experience within their mobile app. So when you open up their app, I can get a Lyft from my mother in New York City here while I sit here in California. My mother doesn't even have to have a Lyft account, doesn't even know who Lyft is. The other thing I can do is I can give permission to my mother's caregiver to take mom anywhere she wants to go with a CareLinks caregiver in a Lyft. So we're doing some really amazing things with them. They branded that as Care Rides. So if you go to carelinks.com/care rides, you can read all about it and watch another great video we put together with them. But that's the next step. And what gets really exciting is beyond that, imagine any consumer who has the Lyft application today can now order a care ride. So they can get a Lyft with a licensed and qualified caregiver in the car with them. That's really where we also see this going as the next phase, where now you have that door-through-door support, you have that licensed and qualified caregiver with you, and the caregiver, instead of them worrying about driving a car, they sit in the back seat with mom and dad. They attend to their client. And oh, by the way, when they drop off the client, they can do their work and take their notes in that back seat. So a lot of great opportunities to marry the two.
Jeff Maltz, who's the co-founder of Silver Ride in the Bay Area, I know when they first set up, they did a bunch of research just to identify the car that was on the market that had the easiest, made it easiest for people to get in and out of. Ken, you've got a classroom full of young people. How do you kind of get them to have this appreciation of who the end user is so that they can build this into the design on the front end?
Well, let me answer by telling you something you just said before, which I believed strongly, and then through testing turned out not to be true. You said how beautiful somebody...
You're saying I'm wrong.
You're dead wrong.
Okay. I just clarify.
You couldn't be more wrong. However, the consolation is I was in the same. So you were saying, who thinks a wheelchair is an elegant, beautiful design? Has anyone... They look like they're designed like an explosion in a parts shop. They're ugly, pasted together. They're horrible. And yet, if you talk to people who are in wheelchairs and you say, you know, we could make this thing look more beautiful, the answer I've gotten, and it's been consistent, it's not no, it's hell no. Because the issue in having a wheelchair is that you're identified by the wheelchair. And you're not. You're a human being that happens to be sitting in this chair, which causes all sorts of concerns anyway. We gave a poster session at Rancho when the first time we did this, and we had the posters up on the wall as you normally have them, except people were sitting down and they couldn't see the posters, and these posters were designed for them. We learned very quickly that that's not that is a concern. We have to be much more sensitive, and certainly making beautiful chairs that you remark about. I couldn't find anyone who wanted one, and we're talking about young people. We're talking about older people. It didn't seem to matter. So,
I would guess that the market is simply large enough that there are segments, right? I mean, just
Yes.
in the United States, you got roughly 110 million people over 50. That's more people than most countries. So to assume there's a one size fits all.
no, you're absolutely right. There could be a small niche market, but it also would violate another concern that we usually have in the class. That many of the things we do, we prefer not to have to go through the whole Medicare, Medicaid process, because that really takes a long time. So we'd like to make things that are so cheap. Before I did this, I did design for the developing world in Guatemala and India, and the first three criteria we used were cheap, cheap, and cheap. And so I'm not that bad right now, but we really want to keep things expensive.
That's exponential, right?
It gets better as you get cheaper. And so there's a lot of stuff that we want to eliminate, and we want to keep it very inexpensive. So that's not really what our market is.
But where I'm going is, how do you? One of the biggest criticisms that I and my team have had, and I think many people, to explain the lack of adoption, as David said in his opening, there's no shortage of activity in this space. There is a lot of activity. I mean, we have a live pitch event, which for the last 5 years, has only been focused on healthcare and caregiving. And over the 5 years, we had 828 startups apply to be a finalist on stage. There's no shortage of activity.
Yes.
But there's a lot of garbage out there. And it starts with a lack of understanding of who the end user is, what their life is, how to speak to them. So remote monitoring, people don't understand that there's actually two transactions. All these startups assume they're going to sell it to the adult child, to the boomer, and it is a fact. We boomers will spend anything to ensure our own peace of mind. Note that comes first, yes. And the safety of our parents. The problem is there's a second transaction that's not financial, and that's the transaction with my mother to allow you into her home.
Yeah.
And she's going to give you the bird, being a good working class Jewish girl from the Bronx. And, it's like, who are you? Well, Jody bought this for you and it's going to give you peace of mind. I said, what do I care? What have you done for me lately? And so it's really a conversation of, and I think you all got into, is what is important to her about her freedom or her starting to lose it, or her control over her life, which she's starting to lose in different ways, where her independence is constrained, etc. That is a different conversation. It's a different value proposition. It's different marketing, messaging. Where are you seeing it done right?
Well, I mentioned earlier sexy, and I'll tell you why. Last week...
It's those Post-its.
It's those Post-its. Senior transportation was my startup. I also have some lifestyle business. One of them is dating. It's teaching older adults how to online date. Last week I kicked off a session. We had to start late because the parking lot was jam-packed. There was a line out the door. The average age was about 75, which is great because what we do know is in that last decade of our life, we are more likely not to be able to drive. So this is a great target market. I had more emails after that class, people asking me specific questions. I'm using a video conferencing platform, teaching through lifelong centers, so it is really remembering those faces who look older than we might are still that same vibrant person, and I think that's who we market to. So quite honestly, I am looking to see how I can leverage their interest in online dating into their interest in transportation.
So here's how. Because I did want to talk about autonomous vehicles. And the fact is, if you're not worrying about driving, you could be dating.
Absolutely.
And if you just build in this capability based on voice command, problem solved.
I think we're talking about freedom, and that's what we need to think of when we see transportation. It is about freedom and how we market that message. That is what we are offering you, that you can be free, because that, what I hear from, again, that lifelong learning experience, it is all about ease and freedom and independence. They are ardent supporters of maintaining that.
So let's look at autonomous vehicles. It's a very hot topic. Very bizarrely, I was on 3 different stages at CES this year, and 2 of the speaking engagements were both about autonomous vehicles. Only one of them was about healthcare and caregiving. Very hot topic. And I think that people, kind of just immediately jump to the Jetsons. It's like whatever that futuristic, reference point is. For me, it's about putting people on the bridge of the Enterprise, because I'm a Trekkie. But all of those underlying technologies are really now starting to come together, of voice command, voice recognition. We're going to start to see, voice biomarkers, eventually. AI, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, machine learning. All of these things, IoT, all of these things are now starting to come together in different types of combinations that are, in the end, taking friction out of the user interface. And to me, this is where things get really exciting with regard to greater adoption and therefore greater benefit to the individual, but also we're now able to see over the horizon, I think, about much more plausible futures than before. It would have been really much more, looking into, the looking glass.
But in David Lindeman's talk, you heard the fact that the existence of this great technology doesn't mean it's going to be user-friendly for people who are older. And we all know that. People don't want to use a cell phone. They feel threatened by new technology because it makes them feel stupid. If you have a grandchild handy, that helps a lot, but the grandchild has to spend a lot of time. I know I had my grandchild explain to me something on the cell phone, and she was going so fast. I said, could you go a little slower? And then I could see her did one of those 12-year-old girl eye rolls, and she said, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought. I think that's a common problem, and I think one of the things is that people in this room here can be the translator of this great new technology, which is very useful for younger people, but really has some adoption barriers for older people.
So, Dan, so as we look out of the future, and autonomous vehicles, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and it's also when different things are going to happen. So, my take is in the near term, 3 to 5 years, robo-taxis, robo-shuttles in definite geographic ring-fenced areas. It's here. It's already here. So how does this all play into kind of Lyft's thinking
Well, I think a key thing for everyone in the room and just entrepreneurs in the space, I think the biggest mistake we make in this space is that we just think we're going to throw technology to the wall, it's going to stick in this vertical. It's a phased approach. It's just, in my many years in the industry, it's just not going to happen overnight. So for us at Lyft, for example, you saw in the video, as we know, about 30 to 40% of our elders don't have a smartphone or even know how to use all the features of a smartphone. So what good is the Lyft app to them? So it's a conscious effort at Lyft to build a tool, we call it Concierge, where our partner schedules the ride for the elder. So in the Brookdale example, Pat calls the front desk, they schedule the ride for them, they have all the information about the ride, they know where Pat is at all times, and all Pat needs to know is be outside in 3 minutes, your car is gonna be there. That's phase one of how we're looking at things. To your point, Joni, you're absolutely right. It's pretty amazing. I mean, we just had Mary Barra, the CEO of GM in our office a couple weeks ago, giving a talk to the company, and it's going to happen a lot quicker than people think, but it is going to be a phased approach. You're not just going to see autonomous cars all over the road. What you're going to see is finite routes in major cities from point A to point B every day. You'll see it start off during the day, not at nighttime, and in only good weather conditions. That's phase one. And then over time, it'll get phased in more and more in different weather conditions. And then the challenge is a little bit of that gray area when you have autonomous and non-autonomous cars on the road together. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but something that we'll overcome. So for us at Lyft, we definitely, it's a huge effort at the company. We're thinking about it every single day, and it's going to significantly impact our elder population, but it's also about that experience. So how we view autonomous, it's almost going to be like a monthly subscription. So like your Spotify or Netflix, you're going to have a monthly plan for your transportation, for your car, and you're going to pay whatever that number is for the standard package, or you're going to pay $50 or $100 for a high-end package for a trip from LA to Las Vegas with your friends to party. That's kind of where this is going to be going in our view. Now, part of that package might be a package with a caregiver in the car. So when you take your autonomous car, you'll have a qualified and licensed caregiver in the car to support you as you need. So it's definitely something that is going to take time in terms of how it's going to phase for this population, but I can promise you it's going to make a significant impact. And we want, at Lyft, we certainly want to be at the forefront of that.
So looking at autonomous vehicles relative to the challenges, you see solutions, you don't see solutions, you shrug and you say, it's got a driver, it doesn't have a driver, who cares? What do you say?
Interestingly enough, I was having this conversation yesterday. I'm very driven, literally, by this topic. I know, I actually didn't mean to say that, but I really am driven about this. And my concern, because it now dovetails into housing, because it is going to be point to point. I happen to live in a gated community. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes out to walk out of the community, to then get to a main road, and the bus is about a quarter of a mile down the way. The average age of my community, depending on the cul-de-sac you live in, can be about 75. I know they are not using these. So the issue then becomes, it's great if it's similar to our public transportation system. If you can get to the bus stop, you may be able to take public transit. If you can get to that first line, because again, we're looking at the near future, but what do we know the near future right now is somebody that's age 85 or 90. So we're now looking at a different set of challenges, but again, I think through that collaboration, we can look at how do we bridge those gaps, how to get them to that autonomous one-way station. I know it's doable, one, because there's a heightened awareness about it, and I think it's exciting because on the offset of that, the challenge of getting there is the opportunity for freedom.
From the perspective of you were pleasantly surprised, what's been the most exciting lesson, learning, insight that's kind of popped from all these pilots?
Honestly, I think we're improving people's lives. Our mission statement at Lyft, what drives us, and most people don't know this, why we have a pink mustache. When we started, we wanted a ride-share network where a female would feel safe getting into a car. And we do a lot of things around security, safety that's unique to Lyft. But our mission statement is improve people's lives with the world's best transportation. And for me, what's been really delightful and just all these, we have over 100 partnerships in this space, is spending time with folks like Pat and going into these communities and hearing about their stories. We now have people at Brookdale who go to weekly choir lessons using Lyft. They go to the grocery store. They just go less than a mile to get food, and they don't have to worry about walking back with their grocery bag. And it's really the impact we have. You know, my prior world as an entrepreneur, I never had a platform like Lyft with our scale to really make a significant impact. I mean, we at Lyft are in over 250 markets, over 700,000 drivers. We've done close to 5 million rides a week now at Lyft when you think about the company. And that's been since 2012. So just in a short period of time, how far we've come. And now for me personally, in this specific industry and touching our elder population, I truly believe we will improve people's lives.
Okay. I don't care about the clock. What most exciting thing?
Most exciting thing is to take engineering students and who are normally working on very arcane, interesting, physically possible things to do and make them on work and see them get carried away working on things that really benefit human beings.
Last word.
That we're seeing a lot of now design technology, but taking that human experience with that compassion, which hasn't always been in a business model.
Impact, business, drop the mic. Thanks very much.